form the 250 U.S. Grand Prix Motocross. And a battle between the home teams at the 24 hours of the gates for the only stateside appearance of the 250cc World Championship Series. World champ Alessandro Puzar of Italy clinched his title in Unadilla last year despite a bad cold. He came back this year with a 35-point lead over Honda-mounted Trampas Parker. Trampas is a Louisiana native who's made his racing home in Europe since winning the 125 World Championship. Mike Healy, who also chased 125 GPs the last 2 years, came to Unadilla fresh from moto victories in the last two 250 GPs in San Marino and France. And with that, the USGP is underway. Now watch as the transition from the grass to the dirt gobbles up the world champ Puzar, who for all practical purposes called it a day at that point. Into the lead went Jeff Stanton with an unfamiliar GP number, but the style that makes him American champion. His first moto pursuer was Parker, who didn't stay in the States long enough to really make a name for himself, choosing instead to head for Europe in the GP wars while he was still a teenager. Trampas, by the way, says he'll do more racing in America next year. Now here is the battle for third coming up. This is the Dutchman Thuis Wieser on a Kawasaki and the pursuing Mickey Diamond, former 125 national champion, out of retirement to ride for an Italian Yamaha importer. Diamond's turned to dust when Mickey tried an inside move and found himself picking himself up off the ground. But that battle for position was far from over as Wieser passed the lap Ray Somo on the outside. Watch the inside and say hello to Mike LaRocco, whose impressive charge to third was a preview of his second moto heroics. But for all that, it was Stanton who stood the tallest by far at the end of the first leg. A runner-up finish by Parker enabled him to close the World Championship point gap on the crashed-out Alessandro Puzar. Well, the break between motos gave Cycle News reporters an opportunity to get to the bottom of the opening ceremonies controversy at Unadilla. Trampas Parker, Mickey Diamond, and Mike Healy are all Americans, but compete in Europe with licenses issued by the countries in which they live. In Healy's case, the license is French. During opening ceremonies, he refused to join Parker, Diamond, and the other American riders under a U.S. flag for the national anthem. Instead, he chose to be recognized with the French riders. No, it wasn't some political protest. According to Cycle News, Healy was just mad about a pre-race newspaper quote in which Jeff Stanton called the Americans who compete on the European GP circuit has-beens. Stanton later said it was a mistake to refer to those riders in those terms. Healy, meanwhile, limped through the first moto with injuries suffered in a Saturday qualifying crash, then worked his way to sixth in the second moto. Because it hosts only 2 races a year, Unadilla is one of the world's premier circuits. The entire course covered with that green grass until practice churns up the dark, loamy soil. Second moto conditions much to the liking of unranked Alex Hoveld, until LaRocco passed him like the Belgian was riding a waffle iron. Hoveld hung on to finish 6th, while LaRocco, who hails from LaPorte, Indiana, took the lead that he would have to fight hard to protect, and I don't have to tell you who he was going to fight with. Coming back from a terrible start, number 19 Stanton was equally impressive as he dropped Sweden's number 12 Peter Johansson to 4th and set his sights on Hoveld. It's clear that while carving his way through the pack of Europeans, Stanton had his mind on one man, Mike LaRocco. And Mike must have had his mind on something other than this steep uphill, because he got all twitchy and tipped over at a most inopportune moment. Now, it would be reasonable for you to wonder how a man who found himself in that somewhat awkward position ended up winning the race. Well, part of the answer is LaRocco's own perseverance, and the other part is that he was not alone in his misfortune. Witness this less than graceful maneuver by Mr. Stanton. Now, it appeared that Jeff lost a little less time than Mike did, but look who came steaming fast just as Jeff was getting back up to speed. And what followed was a spectacular hand-to-hand battle as these two Americans upstaged all the contenders for the World Championship with the ferocity of their battle for the lead. Stanton, again, with a critical mistake. He was forced to play catch-up, and yet catch-up he did. With the laps winding down and nothing really at stake for these two except bragging rights, championship points in this series mean nothing to them. Stanton and LaRocco traded blows a couple of times. Right here as Jeff blasted his way inside, and in the next corner as LaRocco fought fire with fire. But in the final lap, it was LaRocco who managed to pull away slightly and claim the checkered flag. That may have earned Larocco the bragging rights, but it was Stanton who was credited with the overall victory on points. And the fans went home secure in the knowledge that while the World Championship Series will return to Europe, the best riders will stay right here in America and battle for the U.S. national crown. Now, when we come back, we'll have a look at the 125cc action at Unadilla. Stay with us. In a very competitive 125cc support class, running alternate motos with the international stars. The key to the start is concentration. Now, there are those who believe this is the best starting area and first turn in American motocross. It is certainly to the liking of Jeff Emig, number 18, who got a pair of hole shots on Sunday, but gave away the first one in a race with Mike Kiedrowski through the gravity cavity. Kiedrowski looked back to say thanks, and after several heartless opponents used his Yamaha for traction, Emig rejoined the race, charged all the way back to fourth. Kiedrowski set sail on his Kawasaki en route to a perfect score for the day. Mike's the hottest thing in the 125 division right now, and behind him, Steve Lamson on the outside was locked in a scorching battle with Doug Henry for second. One key to going fast here was to pick the right rut to ride. Lamson made the better choice this time and pulled away. But as the interval shot coming up will show you, Kiedrowski came under no serious pressure from Lamson and his Team Peak Honda. The gap from first to second about 10 seconds as the leaders locked in finish positions for the first moto and calculated strategies for the deciding moto number 2. Though this was a non-points event, 7 of the top 10 riders in the 125 national standings were here, and so that was a satisfying and financially rewarding victory for the class point leader, Canyon Country, California's Mike Kiedrowski. Well, with a win under his belt and Emig having settled for fourth in the first leg, Kiedrowski was clearly the favorite in the second moto. But as we said, he had to hustle a good bit to maintain his perfect record. Take a look. Emig grabbed another hole shot and this time was careful to keep the rubber side down, maintaining command of the race for a while. Lamson again faced a challenge for second, but this time it's Denny Stevenson pressing until this miscue sent Denny off track. Now, isn't there something in the rule book about re-entering the course at the point where you left it? Well, that's the least of Denny's problems. Here comes Kiedrowski trying to take advantage of the mistake, and sure enough, Mike does move to third. Now, we'll stay right with this sequence as a good example of what happens when a guy finds his rhythm. Mike never misses a beat once Stevenson is behind him. Instead, he's looking forward. He's figured out a way to drive right on by Steve Lamson while he's at it. And Mike found the opportunity on one of Unadilla's many little dips, used a block pass to make it official, and set his sights on Emig. Remember what we said earlier about being in the right rut at the right time? Emig got the message just a little too late, and by the time he could make a mid-rut correction, Kiedrowski had zinged him on the inside, and in that moment, that race was decided. Kiedrowski couldn't have been better on an afternoon that saw him with back-to-back moto victories and the overall win.
Yeah, it was a tough moto. I got off to kind of a slow start. I was back, got about 10th, I think. And I just started, working on the guys. It was really rough out there, deep ruts. And I just kept on hammering away. And about the 15-minute mark, I just said, hey, I got to do it now or never. So I went out there and did it.
Here's a look at the top 5 125s to wrap up our coverage of the U.S. Grand Prix at Unadilla. But the good news for you motocross fans, you're going to see a full hour of coverage of that event right here on ESPN. That will air on August the 10th at 3